Are you ready to be unleashed into your destiny? Then tune into the Lions Unchained podcast each and every Monday. Carl Joseph is a unique researcher who investigates current events, prophecy, geopolitics, cults, and much more through a biblical lens. Check out carljosephministries.com. Get ready for a paradigm shift as the chains come off, because the truth will set you free. Lions Unchained is available on Spotify, iTunes, and Stitcher. Subscribe now.
Today, friend, we embark upon a subject familiar to us all, and that is pride. Pride, by definition, is two-edged. It can be a form of self-respect, or instead improper, excessive self-esteem, conceit, or even arrogance. Now, on the one hand, we want to have a sense of pride about ourselves to some degree. Pride in our work, our appearance, pride in our character, in our family, etc. So there's an argument that a healthy measure of pride or self-respect is a good trait. In fact, the Apostle Paul even goes so far as to express a positive kind of pride when speaking of confidence in Christians or of strength in the Lord. However, it is the sinful meaning of pride, the egotistical form of pride, which most frequently appears in the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, and that is our focus today. It is interesting to note that classical Greek and Roman cultures had a particular aversion to pride, stigmatizing it as hubris and making virtually all their literary tragedies a variation on the theme of self-destructive effects of pride and its offensiveness to their gods. So even spiritually pagan cultures had picked up on this sin. In the Bible, likewise, such pride, we are warned, brings disgrace, breeds quarrels, goes before destruction, and brings humiliation. Pride is dangerous, friend. So dangerous, in fact, it caused the downfall of creation in the angelic realm. I'm not talking about Adam and Eve here. I'm speaking of the prior fall and the pride of Lucifer, which caused a rebellion in the heavenlies, spoken of in the book of Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28. The 5 I wills of Lucifer, having been witness to God's glory, caused him to make comparisons with God himself. He wanted a taste of the glory for himself, leading him to rebel with a third of the angels. And the 5 I wills of Isaiah 14 are testimony to his pride and exaltation. The most salient Bible verse is perhaps Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 17, where some translations use the term pride, saying, "Your heart was proud because of your beauty." Evidently, Lucifer spent too much time in the mirror and was a possessor of a selfie stick. You see, pride can cost us dearly, friend, and Scripture is testimony to this. In his pride, Moses lost his temper and was kept out of the promised land. Pride kept Joshua from seeking God's will at Ai, and he lost the battle. King Nebuchadnezzar's pride turned him into an animal, akin to a werewolf, in fact. Pride nearly prevented Naaman from being cured of leprosy, objecting to dip several times in the dirty river Jordan, unlike the crystal clear waters of his beloved rivers of Damascus. And finally, pride led to Peter's denial of Christ. Charles Haddon Spurgeon once said, quote, "No matter how dear you are to God, if pride is harbored in your spirit, he will whip it out of you. They that go up in their estimation must come down again by his disciple." Unquote. And there it is, friend. The law of gravity and pride go hand in hand. What goes up must come down. Stay humble and flee from pride. As C.S. Lewis observed, pride is essentially competitive. It is competitive by its very nature, while the other vices are competitive only, so to speak, by accident. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. We say that people are proud of being rich or clever or good looking, but they are not. They are proud of being richer or cleverer or better looking than others. If everyone else became equally rich or clever or good looking, there would be nothing to be proud about. It is the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. Once the element of competition is gone, pride has gone, and arguably the sin of comparison is the first sin of all. It is a precursor to pride. The Bible identifies pride as an attitude of the heart and spirit. Hence one reads, haughty eyes and a proud heart, the lamp of the wicked are sin. Proverbs 21:14. Ecclesiastes 7:8 speaks of proud in spirit, and the psalmist declares, O Lord, my heart is not proud, or my eyes haughty. Pride is cited in the two lists of the most glaring sins in the Bible, along with the sins for which God is going to judge the Gentiles. Included with the sins that will be prevalent in the last days, Paul includes boasting, arrogance, and conceit in 2 Timothy chapter 3. The thing about pride is, it's hard to keep hidden in your heart. It can infect one's speech, and boasting is one way by which this sin appears in one speaking. Pride also can appear in the way one looks at another person. Hence the scriptures speak of haughty eyes, or some translators render it as a proud look. The psalmist speaks of a person with haughty looks and an arrogant heart as one he cannot endure. Pride may also take the ugly form of contemptible treatment of others. One of the illustrations of this in the Bible is the way in which the Pharisees and other Jewish leaders treated and spoke of those beneath their social standing. They especially despised tax collectors and sinners, who they thought were the lowest of the low. And let us not forget the tale of King Uzziah, which I read only yesterday in my devotional time. Pride was his downfall, who, because of this sin, dared to offer incense on the altar and was smitten with leprosy as his punishment from God. You see, a king must never cross the boundary into the priestly duty and vice versa, but old Uzziah paid a hefty price for this, as did King Saul, come to think of it, when he sacrificed in the stead of the prophet Samuel. Hezekiah also, after his healing by the Lord, became proud of heart and brought wrath upon himself, Judah and Jerusalem. Another equally famous example of pride is Haman in the book of Esther. He erupts in pride and plots to revenge when his enemy Mordecai refuses to bow down and tremble before him. When the king desires to honor someone, Haman says to himself, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" Ego alert! He then proceeds to prescribe a pretentious show of glory for himself. Eventually, Haman is forced to lavish his display of glory on his enemy, Mordecai, resulting in his own humiliation and disgrace, and eventually the proud villain is hung on the very gallows that he had prepared for his archenemy. God has a sense of irony, friend. The Pharisee in the temple praying and comparing himself with the humble tax collector is another example of pride. Herod's refusal to give God the glory for his greatness brought judgment from God, and he was eaten by worms and died for his pride in Acts chapter 12. If you don't think God takes this sin of pride seriously, friend, think again. And like I touched upon earlier, Ezekiel chapter 28 describes the pride of the leader of Tyre, and taken by many biblical scholars to refer in a deeper sense to the fall of Satan back in the beginning. Pride cannot only bring the downfall of individuals, but nations also. This was the sin which is specifically mentioned as leading to other sins, and which ultimately brought about the removal of both Israel and Judah from the land of Canaan, the land God desired to give them in totality. It is also the specific sin which brought about the downfalls of the king of Assyria and the king of Moab. Because of its deadliness, Israel is specifically warned against pride and the tendency to forget God, which often stems from it. Our tendency to not want to bother God about certain things can often get us into trouble, and that is something I've struggled with down the years. Oh, I'll just proceed with this. I can do this. It'll be easy. Let me plow ahead. I don't need to pray about it. Oops. Later on, we come to find out all kinds of complications and permutations have ensued because we moved ahead presumptuously, which is the fruit of pride. The biblical images of pride are most obviously of rulers and nations, but pride is a vice within reach of any individual with enough money or power to provide a platform for it. Isaiah paints a vivid picture of haughty women who walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing along as they go, tinkling with their feet. Similar vividness characterizes the portrait of the arrogant and prosperous in Psalm 73, who are poised on the verge of imminent ruin. The Psalms are replete with briefer vignettes of proud people, the violent, the slanderer, those who sin with their mouths, the oppressor, the scornful, those with haughty hearts and eyes, so on and so forth. From Jesus comes the satiric portrait of the banquet guest who ostentatiously seats himself in a place of honor, only to be moved to a lower place, accompanied by the aphorism that he who exalts himself will be humbled. And remember this golden nugget, Proverbs chapter 16 verses 18 through 19. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better it is to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. So technically, the old saying, pride goes before the fall, isn't strictly correct, as according to our beloved King James, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And of course, haughtiness is a brother or sister of pride. One definition of haughtiness is to be blatantly and disdainfully proud. So you could argue haughtiness is a higher or more lofty level of pride. You see, pride keeps some very bad company. It is associated with such varied vices as perverse speech, boastfulness, defiance of God, indifference to the poor and needy, self-deceit, the lust of the flesh and of the eyes, and false trust in riches. Twice pride is placed in a catalogue of highly charged vices. In light of the preceding, it is no surprise to read that pride is one of the 7 things which the Lord hates in Proverbs chapter 6 verses 16 through 18. These 6 things does the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaks lies, and he that sows discord among the brethren. Let me reiterate, friend, the Lord hates these traits. We are to have nothing to do with them. They are an abomination in his eyes and should be detestable to us. Bear in mind also, within the pages of the New Testament, it is also said by 2 different writers that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. These references by the apostles stem back to the book of Proverbs, namely Proverbs 3:34 and Proverbs 18:12, to which James and Peter may be referring. But friend, do you know why God has particular disdain for pride? It is because he wants the glory for himself. God should be glorified in our day-to-day, not ourselves. It is God who gave us the breath, the talent, the smarts, the acumen, the good looks, or whatever. It is he who should get the glory. Pride takes glory for itself. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 29 says that no flesh should glory in his presence. And that's speaking of the judgment day of Christ for us, the Bema seat, or in fact the great white throne judgment for the unsaved. In either case, no flesh should glory in his presence. Any attempt to do so is of an antichrist spirit. The concept of glorification can be found in Jeremiah 9:23 through 24. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorifies glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, which exercises loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. Friend, to know Jesus is eternal life. Do you know him? Stay away from pride, friend. It will cost you dearly. It will circumvent or cut short the calling of God on your life, or even your life itself. Give God the glory and take none for yourself.
You've been listening to Carl Joseph and the Lions Unchained podcast. Carl is a minister who's witnessed God's supernatural power to save, heal, and deliver. Carl is a unique researcher who investigates current affairs, societal trends, technology, cults, and end-time events, all through a biblical lens. Every Monday, new podcasts are uploaded, so stay tuned for the next opportunity to roar into victory. Check out carljosephministries.com for exciting articles, teachings, and discussion points. See you next week. don't forget to hit the subscribe button.